I think to begin, we'd love to start with just a little bit about your story and your journey. And the background context that a lot of people will have coming into this conversation is you were the first data engineering hire at GitLab. So I was wondering if we could start there. And can you tell us a little bit about that early experience? And I think give us some of the information about the dynamics of the company. So what was the need at that point in the company, and why did you choose to get involved at that point?
So the stage of the company, I was hired by the senior director of data and analytics at the time. He brought me on, and I intentionally. It was an interesting story to I think try and get with GitLab. I was actually looking for a job, but I wanted something specifically remote first because we knew we were going to have a kid and we wanted that flexibility. And based on my previous experience, I was actually kind of aiming a little bit lower in terms of responsibility and career trajectory. I was managing a team. I had a title of director, though it's for a smaller company. But I was like, okay, I want to double down and kind of focus on my data engineering skills. And so this kind of aligned all the buttons, and I was happy with the compensation. About 2 months after I joined, he told me that he was leaving the company, and so I would be the only data person reporting directly to the CFO because we were in the finance org. For me, that was kind of an opportunity to say, okay, you either need to hire a manager or I can step up and lead the team. And so I made the decision and had the conversations with my wife and of course with the CFO, and like I can do this. I can lead the team. I can hire. I've done it before. And so I was promoted to manager, and I was given the budget to hire a team and kind of think about the whole data strategy. So really, from technically wasn't the first data hire, but it essentially was the first long lasting data hire. And yeah, from there, so I joined in January, was manager early April, had my first hire in June, and all through that we're growing and growing and growing. I think by the end of the year it was like 500 people. And at the end of the year, I had 2 people on my team, a data engineer and a data analyst, so 3 people for about 500 folks. So that's kind of the context of that first year. That was 2018 when I joined.
And how did that experience then evolve into Meltano?
Yeah. So Meltano was kind of being incubated when I joined. It was originally a bit of a pet project from the CEO, Sid, and it was kind of like under the data team as well. I think the person who was formerly my boss was trying to manage this and figure out what that project was going to become. It was framed as like biz ops. So it's basically like, oh, what the data team is doing, what the finance team is doing seems very analogous to what all these software teams are doing, and GitLab's building a DevOps product. So let's just do that for data teams. So it was called the BizOps project, and we shared a repo as a data team and as the BizOps project. And they had some engineers kind of working on this, and it was a bit of a development arm for the data team. It grew and grew. At one point that year, I think we picked the Meltano name, and then towards the end of the year, it got to the point where it's like, okay, Meltano is kind of has their own vision, and the needs of GitLab as a company marching towards an IPO are a little bit higher, and so we need to have a little bit clearer separation of concerns. And so I was like, look, we still want to be involved, and I was basically their primary customer and voice of the customer, for lack of a better word. But I would basically, look, I need to go pay for some of these tools, but we want to use Meltano. We want to help it grow. So it kind of came out of the thinking of just like, well, let's just do what we did for GitLab, do that for data teams, and it's evolved a lot from there.
So what's so interesting is I don't think it's a very common pathway for somebody to get involved, like very, very ground level, like grassroots, building out a data engineering org, and then to have that like evolve and expand almost into its own entire entity, and then to have that become its own product suite. Like when you reflect on that experience, almost like that transition from GitLab to then Meltano becoming its own entity, like were there any lessons or experiences around that shift that you learned about data engineering along the way?
One challenge for the early team is they didn't really have anybody on the team who had experience working in kind of the data profession. So after, I think around 2019, the team grew. They hired like a general manager, and there was a focus. The focus shifted more towards like open source, end to end, but with a focus on BI and really focusing on solo founders. And so there was kind of that pivot there. At some point, the team shrunk back down to one person, Dawaman, who's now the CEO. And he repivoted after looking at the industry and talking to a lot of people on kind of the open source ELT aspect of it, and doubling down on like Singer and DBT as these critical tools in the start of any data journey. That lesson of just like figuring out what the problem is and actually solving that problem is one that kind of keeps coming up and up again. And even for us, as we've spun out, we went back to kind of having this larger vision focused on again end to end, but now it's even more focused on, now we were kind of aiming to be the best way to deploy a modern data stack, open source or not. It's just a lot of iterations about solving the problems that people are having, but it can be tough, I think, to understand what the problems are if you haven't ever worked or even been fully adjacent to some of these positions.